What would you do if strangers came to your door at midnight, dressed as cops, demanding you open up? For one black woman, that terrifying moment turned into a shocking showdown. Because when she flashed her U.S. Marshal badge, everything changed. And the men who thought they were in control ran for their lives. This is a story about fear, intimidation, and justice. It begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood. On the surface, it looked like the picture of order. Manicured lawns, freshly painted fences, neighbors waving politely at one another. But beneath that glossy surface was something much darker. An HOA board drunk on power, obsessed with control and willing to do anything, to make a woman they saw as different bow to their will. The woman was Danielle Carter. She was 38 years old. She had worked hard to buy her home, a milestone of independence and security. But what her neighbors didn't know was that Danielle was no ordinary woman. She carried both a history of struggle and a badge of authority. She was a U.S. Marshal, and when the HOA crossed the line, they had no idea who they were dealing with. It started small. Danielle received a letter about the color of her shutters, then another about her unapproved patio furniture. Soon the letters turned into fines, then threats of liens against her home. But Danielle wasn't easily intimidated. She had dealt with worse: fugitives, hardened criminals, life-and-death situations. Compared to that, a letter from an HOA felt petty. Still, the pattern escalated. She began noticing unfamiliar cars parked outside her house, strangers photographing her property, her trash cans knocked over in the night. At first, she chalked it up to coincidence. But deep down, her instincts whispered, "This is deliberate." Her neighbors kept their distance. Some whispered behind her back. Others avoided eye contact. The HOA board had painted her as the problem homeowner, and in neighborhoods like this, reputation was everything. But Danielle refused to break until the night they came. It was a little before midnight when Danielle heard the bang on her front door. "Police, open up." The voice was loud, forceful, a command meant to trigger instant compliance. Danielle froze. She hadn't called the police. She wasn't under investigation. Something about it felt off. She approached the door cautiously and peeked through the peephole. Two men stood outside in dark uniforms. Badges glinted in the dim light. Their hands rested casually near their holsters. But something wasn't right. The uniforms looked cheap. Their boots were scuffed, their belts mismatched. And one of the men kept glancing nervously over his shoulder, as if worried about being seen. Danielle's chest tightened. Her instincts, honed from years of fieldwork, screamed at her, "These men are not cops." "Ma'am, this is official police business," one of them barked. "Open the door immediately." Danielle kept her voice steady. "Badge numbers?" she demanded through the wood. The men exchanged a quick glance. "We'll explain everything when you open the door. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her jaw clenched. That was the final confirmation. Real police never refused to identify themselves, never. Her heart pounded, but her mind sharpened. This was no ordinary harassment. This was an operation meant to scare her, to break her, to push her into submission, and she knew exactly who was behind it: the HOA. She had two options: hide, pretend she wasn't home, or confront them head-on. Danielle wasn't the type to hide. She moved quickly to her bedroom, opened her safe and retrieved two things: her service pistol and her U.S. Marshal badge. With calm, deliberate steps, she returned to the door. She cracked it open just slightly, enough to let them see her. Her eyes locked on theirs. And then she held up her badge. "I'm with the United States Marshal Service," she said, her voice sharp as steel. "Now tell me, who the hell are you?" The men froze. One's mouth fell open. The other stammered, "We're just here on HOA business." But before he could finish, his partner snapped, "Go, go!" In a blur, they bolted down the driveway, scrambling into a dark SUV parked at the curb. The tires screeched as they sped away into the night. Danielle stood in her doorway, badge in one hand, gun steady in the other. Her breathing was heavy. Her anger boiled. They hadn't expected resistance. They thought she'd be scared, compliant, broken. Instead, they ran. The next morning, Danielle filed a detailed report. Local police arrived, and with her connections, the U.S. Marshal Service got involved. The investigation revealed the shocking truth. The two men weren't police officers. They weren't even security guards. They were contractors, hired by none other than the HOA president. Emails and text messages told the story. Plans to make her regret moving here. Discussions about teaching her a lesson. Payments disguised as community improvement expenses. It was a deliberate campaign of harassment, born out of control, racism, and arrogance, but they never expected their target to carry federal authority. When the news broke, the neighborhood was stunned. Some residents were horrified, others secretly relieved, because Danielle wasn't the only one the HOA had bullied. She was just the only one who fought back. The HOA president was arrested on charges of harassment, conspiracy, and impersonation of law enforcement. The rest of the board resigned under pressure. The so-called perfect neighborhood was exposed for what it truly was, a community controlled by fear and intimidation. And Danielle, she became a quiet symbol of resistance. Weeks later, Danielle stood on her porch, the same porch where strangers once tried to scare her into silence. Now, it was peaceful, calm. She thought about how easily the story could have ended differently if she hadn't trusted her instincts, if she hadn't carried her badge, if she had opened the door without question. But she did trust herself. She did stand firm, and in doing so she not only protected her home, she exposed the corruption that had poisoned her community. Her message was clear. No matter how much power people think they have, justice does not bow to intimidation. This story isn't just about a rogue HOA. It's about resilience. It's about standing your ground when fear knocks at your door. Danielle Carter's courage reminds us that intimidation only works if we let it. And sometimes all it takes is one moment of bravery to change everything. If you found this story powerful, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories where justice prevails.